and we can already see that China is going to be very different from the Western paradigm as illustrated by the UK once and America today. Where, I mean, China's history is not one of missionary expansion, you know, trying by war, you know, taking its idea and its model and its beliefs across the world, as the Europeans did and the United States has done. I don't think you could ever say really that China has majored on military power, for example, on war. And that's the opposite to the American philosophy and indeed the British philosophy before that. And people don't give nearly enough credit to China for the fact that since its rise began, it has been an extraordinarily peaceful rise. It has not been involved in any serious wars. There have been a few odd border clashes, but they were strictly border clashes. You compare that with the history of the United States or Japan or Britain or France or Germany, all of them had many wars of expansion. And so I think China is going to be very different in that context. China is not a country that believes in sharp change, in destroying and so on. It's much more interested in a process of change, a process of mutation. So when the Chinese say, we support the existing international system, they mean it. They don't mean that they're actually going to replace it with something different. They might, of course, they argue, and rightly in my view, that the existing system needs reforming because it's inadequate in all sorts of respects. But they have great respect for a system which allowed them to become, you know, to transform itself over a period of 35, 40 years. In the longer run, the rise of China is obviously willy-nilly, irrespective really of what China thinks or does. It's going to change a lot because China's so big, you know, it's going to be easily the biggest economy in the world. By 2030, it'll probably be something like twice the size of the American economy. It'll be larger than the American economy and European economy put together. Obviously, that is going to necessitate big changes in the international system. But I don't think that China particularly has a revolutionary view of what should happen. I don't think it thinks in those terms. It's more incrementalist, actually, the Chinese view. There is one really important thing, though, to say, and that is the changes we're talking about are not just about China. The biggest single change since 1945 is the transformation and the rise of the developing world, of which China is part and which constitutes about 85% of the world's population. And in my view, that majority of the world's population will constitute the new international order. Because one of the weaknesses of the present international order is it's based fundamentally, historically, on the rich world, which is only about 15% of the world's population. Well, I definitely don't think that the trade war is going to stop China's rise, because, you know, take Huawei, okay? Huawei is a remarkable company, and you know, it's come a long way, and it's invented its own path of development. You know, starting in the Chinese countryside, then moving into the Chinese cities, then going increasingly into developing countries, and eventually arriving in the developed countries, except for America, which decided it couldn't bear the competition that Huawei is providing, and it excluded it on security grounds. So Huawei is, you know, Huawei is going to be around, but Huawei is just also an illustration of, I think, the acumen and the dynamism of China. I am much more worried for the United States in the longer run than China, because China's a rising power, America is declining power. This has not been nearly widely recognized enough, including in China, the extent to which America has declined. I don't mean America hasn't still got great power. It has, as we've seen with the trade war and so on. But it is a declining power. And if America decides to shut itself off from the Chinese market and so on, it's cutting its nose to spite its face, because the Chinese market is not only on the verge of becoming the largest in the world, it is the most dynamic. So America's competitiveness will suffer if it cuts itself off from China.